My name is Carlton Cartwright. I'm the Executive Director for Veterans Memorial and Multicultural Histories Incorporated. Today is Wednesday, December 15th, 2021, and we're at the Riviera Beach Preparatory Achievement Academy, and we're here today with Miss, what is your name?
My name is Saundra Long, Saundra G. Long.
Okay, and what branch of the service were you in?
United States Army.
Okay, and what year did you join the Army?
1975 in the Women's Army Corps.
Okay, and why did you join that branch?
Why did I join that branch? Because my father was in the Army and all the rest of my ancestors were in the United States Army, so I represented the Army and my family.
All of your ancestors?
Yes.
Really? How far back does that go, that you know of?
Well, my father, actually, because he was in the Buffalo Soldiers himself.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, nice. Was he in what engagement was he in?
World War II.
Okay, nice.
He was in the 10th Cav.
Where was he stationed? I'm just curious. I mean, this is about you, but I'm curious.
I don't know.
You don't know where he's at? Okay.
There were a lot of questions I wish I'd asked him, but I didn't know to ask at the time.
I understand. Okay, where were you when you entered into the service? Before? What were you doing before you went in the military?
I graduated from high school. I taught prisoners in Westchester Community Jail. And I taught them English and math and so forth. That was part of my internship.
What state were you in?
New York, Long Island, New York.
Okay, all right. Okay, and that's where you grew up?
That's where I was born and raised.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what were you saying when you were doing this job, this internship, where?
I was doing it in Westchester, Westchester County.
Right.
Okay, at the jail, teaching prisoners English and math.
Wow.
As I was pursuing my career in counseling.
Okay. All right, I'm just curious, I'm going to jump ahead. Did you finish a degree in counseling?
Absolutely, I did.
Get your
Yes.
master's or your doctorate?
I got my master's in counseling and my doctorate in pastoral care and counseling.
Wow, okay. That's quite a story right there. Okay, so you went, where was basic training?
Basic training was on Tank Hill in Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
And how long was it?
It was 8 weeks.
Okay, and what did it entail? What was it like? Tell us about it.
Okay, well again, it was the Women's Army Corps, so
Right.
they had not yet combined the forces. The Women's Army was separate from the males.
Mm-hmm.
So I had basic training, just like all the males did, except for I had female drill sergeants at the time. And I was what they called a Super Jane. Super Jane was if you were able to max your PT test.
Oh, okay.
Your physical training test.
Right.
And so I was considered a Super Jane. And for some reason, it seemed to have intimidated one of my drill sergeants in particular.
And why was that?
Because I was from the North, which was an issue at that time, and because I excelled at everything that I did, which really irritated her.
How did you get through that?
Because I had another drill sergeant on the other end, as I was doing a duffel bag drag, as we call it, to Special Training Company, who would say, "You don't belong here," and she would turn me around and send me right back up the hill. And so she really supported me. She had my back, and she made sure that no one else messed with me.
Okay, good. So where did you, okay, when basic was over, did you take a break and go home before you went to tech school? AIT?
Absolutely not, no. After basic training, I went to Fort Sam, Houston, Texas, where I pursued my, I was a medic, which was a prerequisite before I went to PSYOPs. I always wanted to be in psychological operations in the military.
Okay.
And so being a medic, 91 Bravo was a prerequisite for 91G school.
Nice. How much education did you have before you went in the service?
Before I went in the service, I probably had an associate degree.
Okay. All right. So, did you continue your education while you were on active duty?
Absolutely.
Okay. And by the way, how many years total did you do in the military?
I did 20 years.
Great. Okay. So, all right. So, you did your AIT in Texas.
Yes, I did.
How long was it?
That was about 12 weeks.
Okay, and so, where did you?
And I was in the Army Reserve at the time.
Oh, all right.
I was in
So,
the Army Reserve at the time.
all right, so, tech school, everything basically went how? Good, bad, and different?
That went fine.
Okay.
That went well, except for the fact that I didn't at that time continue the 91G school. And so when I finished my AIT, which was Advanced Individual Training, I went to work in Kingsbridge VA Hospital on the cancer ward, utilizing my 91B skills.
Okay, all right, and so how long, you were there for 12 weeks, so, but you accumulated some more education, is that what you're saying?
Well, military education.
Right, right,
Mhm.
okay.
When I went in originally, that was general education.
Up to this point, did you sustain any injuries, or did anyone sustain any injuries in your units?
At that time, it wasn't military injuries, it was civilian injuries that I sustained at the time.
What happened?
Well, one day, it was on the weekend, it was on the weekend, a Sunday evening.
Right.
And somehow I was abducted by some civilians, and I came to the following Monday. I had been written up as AWOL, absent without leave, and so there was investigation, and they found out that what I was saying was legitimate,
Right.
although they never solved the case while I was there.
Right.
And so that was very traumatic.
I'm sure. Sort of took my breath away with that one. This is in Texas, correct?
That was in Texas.
All right, and what year is this?
That was in 1975.
Okay, so can you tell us what happened to you?
Can I tell you what happened, during that time?
Yeah, that you had been abducted.
Yes, I was, and I was injected with some type of drug, so I was unconscious until that following morning. And when I came to, I still don't know where I was, and I walked out and I started hitchhiking, and I got a ride to base.
Okay, so, I mean, were you examined by the
I was,
medical?
yes.
And was there any issues? Have you been brutalized, or?
Just some drug was in my system.
That was it, okay, all right. Okay, so, any other incidences while you were in
Not at that time.
training? Okay.
Not at that time. So I did my training, and then I went back home because I was a reservist at the time.
Right, right.
And then I had 2 weeks training a year. And I did that in the Bronx, at
okay.
Kingsbridge VA Hospital.
Right.
And then I went to Miami. I moved to Miami temporarily.
Okay, so hold on, slow down. You were in the reserve in New York.
In Texas.
Oh, in Texas.
I was in Texas when I got my training, but I was working after my training in New York.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. What civilian job were you doing? Were you working? Were you going to school? What were you doing?
No, actually I was working at Richard's department store.
Okay.
I don't even think they exist anymore.
All right.
And then I was doing my my weekend duties.
Okay. All right. So
Then too, I had several, jobs. Then I started doing residential treatment counseling for dually diagnosed children.
Right.
And so I stayed, it was like in-home counselor.
Okay. Did you finish a degree at this point to be able to do that job, or was it an internship, or what?
It was just a job. I finished my degree when on active duty, not prior to.
Okay. But this job that you were doing before you moved to Florida,
Right.
did it require any certification?
No,
Okay.
no, because before I moved to Florida, that was my internship. When I was in Florida, in Hialeah, working as a residential counselor, then at that time, I had my associate degree. I had moved to Miami, but then I went back to New York. I moved to Miami on my first marriage in 1973.
Right.
I moved to Florida. I had a very unfortunate marriage. I went back home, and that's when I was pursuing my education and school.
Okay.
Okay, then I decided that it was a very trying time
Right.
in the mid and late 70s. And so I knew that based on what was going on, I needed to make a move. I needed to get out of there. So there was nothing happening where I grew up at the time positive. The guys were coming home from Vietnam. They were coming home on drugs, most of them. Most of them had emotional issues.
Right.
And they infiltrated the community. They came home
Right.
to our community.
Right.
And so I needed to leave. And so I went to the APs, that's what it was called, in Brooklyn. And I joined the active army, the regular army from there. And so my reserve time, I cut it short. And then, so I was on reserve from 75 to 78. 78, I went on active duty.
For how long? For the remainder?
Yes.
What year did you separate?
I retired from the Army in 1995.
Okay, all right. Okay, so you went back on active duty. You were in Florida now?
No. I joined from New York, from the, Fort Hamilton.
Okay,
Okay, and I did that because I wanted New York to remain my home of record.
gotcha.
Whereas had I come in through Florida, that would have been my home of record, and I didn't want that.
Okay.
So
where was your first duty station on active duty?
my first duty station was Fort Gordon, Georgia. I didn't have to go back to basic training because I had just come off of reserve and I had done my basic training. So I went to Fort Gordon, Georgia. When I spoke to a recruiter prior to that time, I wanted to go back in the medical field because I wanted to become a 91G, which for psychological operations. But then they said the medical field was closed to prior service females because they wanted to leave the medical areas open for new females to come in. Okay, so there were a lot of us in there, and they wanted to leave the positions open. So they said, well, what else do you want to do? Well, I didn't want to do anything else, so I just thought. And I says, well, I want to be an electrician. I was thinking about the different jobs that people I knew had that were pretty successful. So I said, I want to be an electrician. So the recruiter says, oh, well, that's 36 Charlie. That's an electrician. I said, when I finish school, I want to be able to wire buildings. He said, oh, that's 36 Charlie. And so your training will be at Fort Gordon, Georgia. I went to Fort Gordon, Georgia, only to find at that time that 36 Charlie was a Pullman. So I had to climb telephone poles and string cable across telephone poles.
Okay.
Needless to say, that didn't sit very well with me. I didn't want to do that. I was climbing 75-foot poles,
Right.
and I didn't want to do that at all.
Okay.
So I bucked the system, and I went and spoke to JAG, which was the attorneys and so forth. And I
Right.
told them that my recruiter, hadn't told me the truth. So then they asked me, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to be a 91 Gulf. I want to work in psychological operations. So at the time, they still wouldn't let me do that, so they let me work admin, 71 Lima. So I started working in the battalion staff.
Right.
And I did that for quite a few years, and of course, they loved the way that I worked. And so then they excelled me without promoting. I became drug and alcohol coordinator.
Got it.
Okay, and EEO. But some things.
Equal opportunity.
Equal opportunity, yes.
Officer?
Yes.
Wow.
I did that. So there was some.
I bet that was interesting.
Oh, very much
Did that
so.
keep you busy?
It did, except for the fact that when I came to when I had various complaints, and I wrote them up, and I went to my battalion with those complaints, they wanted me to sweep it under the rug, is how they say it, because of who the charges were against. And so needless to say, I didn't want to do that, so here I was bucking the system again. So I continued working, then I moved from S1 to S4.
What is that?
S4 was where, that was supply.
Okay.
Where I took control of the battalion's finances, okay?
Okay.
So I did that for the rest of my time there before. So I had like a couple $1 million worth of equipment and so forth that I managed. And then it was time for me to leave there.
Any casualties, by the way?
Not at that time.
And so, okay, how long were you at this duty station?
I was there for about 18 months.
Okay, did you travel outside of your area over that 18-month period?
Just when I had vacation, I came home.
Okay,
Mhm.
that was it? You
That
didn't
was
go
it
any-
at the time. I mean, it was Georgia. I had,
Right,
I had, been to Florida, Georgia, that was.
so you've been getting around?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I grew up traveling.
Okay.
My parents were, my father's family was from Miami.
Mhm.
My mother's family was from North Carolina.
Right.
I was living in New York, so every break, spring break, Christmas break, we would travel to Miami, where I would spend time with my first cousins on my dad's side.
Okay,
Okay? And then the other times when I wasn't in between, we would go to North Carolina to my mother's family.
right.
So I was always traveling. I grew up that way.
So where was your next duty station?
So my next duty station from there was back to Fort Jackson, where I was drafted as a drill sergeant. Meanwhile, I had just had my daughter. I didn't mention, I had just had my daughter, who was 2. She was 18 months.
Right,
And so I said, well, I don't want to be a drill sergeant. I just had my daughter. I don't want to raise other people's children. I want to raise my own. So they says, well, I'll tell you what. If you don't take this assignment, when your ETS date comes, you go with it. ETS meaning enlisted time served.
right.
So needless to say, it wasn't conducive to me going back home.
Right.
Plus I called my parents and they said, don't you come back here. You stay there. And because I was doing very well at the time. So I was a drill sergeant. As a matter of fact, that's where I met my second husband.
Okay. How long were you there in Fort Jackson? What state is that in again?
That's in South Carolina,
Okay.
Columbia, South Carolina.
Right. And how long was that tour?
I was there, I was a drill sergeant for 2 years, but I was in drill sergeant school for almost a year. So I was there for 3 years.
Okay.
And that's where I met my husband,
Right.
as a drill sergeant. So I got divorced in May and got remarried in July.
Okay.
And I'm still married, 38 years later.
Congratulations.
I'm still married, yes.
Congratulations.
So he's retired Army and he's a Buffalo soldier as well. So we moved from there, we went to Germany,
How long was the tour?
3 years.
What was your job?
My job at that time, I was working battalion staff and I was also a platoon sergeant, so I was working 2 jobs. So I had 27 soldiers under my charge.
What rank were you by now?
By that time, I was, it's still an E5, I was a sergeant at the time. And so we worked in the motor pool and I, taught them how to maintain the vehicles and do pre-checks and all of that. And then once they went to work, then I went back and worked battalion staff.
How was the food in the military up to this point?
Well, we were eating out of the mess hall, the dining facility. We called it the mess hall.
Right.
And so I really didn't eat very much because, you had to eat very quickly.
Right.
And I never could eat very quickly. So I didn't eat very much of it. So normally when I got off, I would have something to eat.
Right.
And plus, from what I understood, they put certain things in the food. And when I became aware of that, I wasn't going to consume it anyway.
Okay.
So you probably know about that.
You say you were stationed in Germany?
I was in Germany.
Where?
This time. The first time I was in Pirmasens.
What major city is that near? Frankfurt?
Not far from Frankfurt, Heidelberg. Mhm.
Heidelberg, okay.
Not far from there.
And
And there in Germany, I worked communications. I was back in communications.
okay.
And so I worked that. That was uneventful. Okay.
Good.
I left there after 3 years. I was at Fort Riley, Kansas. Actually, I'm so sorry, but I was at Fort Riley, Kansas first.
Okay.
Okay.
And how long were you in Kansas?
I was in Kansas for 3 years.
What was your job there?
At that time, I was working a platoon sergeant in communications as well.
Okay.
And that's when I had my daughter, and that's when I separated from my first husband.
Right.
I was in the Jeep with our lieutenant and a couple of my other peers, and the lieutenant flipped the Jeep. So that was my first injury, when the Jeep tumbled, and I sustained head injuries. They weren't severe enough for me to have to get out of the military.
Separate, okay.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay.
Okay,
But-
and then from there, right, is when I went to Germany.
Okay.
So I did my 3 years in Germany,
Right.
uneventful.
How was the food there?
Well, at that time, I was no longer a trainee.
Right.
So I went, I had
On the
my own
economy,
place. I cooked my own food, so the
Okay.
food was exceptional.
Okay, the food improved drastically. huh?
Absolutely,
Okay,
absolutely.
gotcha. All right, so did you get to travel around Europe while you were in Germany? Where'd you
Absolutely,
go?
out everywhere.
Where?
Went to Switzerland. I went to, and while in Switzerland, we went to the Montreux Jazz Festivals. I went to Holland. I went to Amsterdam. While I was in Holland, they were very big on diamonds. So I, would buy diamonds and everything and go to the Hard Rock Cafe. They had that, which is different than the Hard Rock Cafe here.
Oh,
Needless to
okay.
say.
All right.
And so so then I also went to Birch's Garden in Belgium. I went to the East Bloc before the wall came down.
Oh, okay.
I went to East Berlin.
What year was that?
That must have been, when did the wall come down? Yeah, it was in the early 80s.
Okay.
And I even have memorabilia. I wish I'd brought some of that stuff with me.
Okay.
But yes, so while I was in the East Bloc, I bought a lot of crystal. They had a lot of crystal.
Right.
And you would think that because I was spending so much money, that they would be glad that I was, benefiting their store. But to the contrary, they got angry. They got angry because they couldn't spend the kind of money that we were spending. And so they really didn't appreciate it, if that makes sense. It didn't make sense to me at the time, but later on I realized because we just about really bought the stores out when we went.
Right. You say we, or you had friends that went with you?
Yes, because when we went to the East Bloc,
Fellow soldiers?
Yes, we would take a bus.
Yeah.
And we would get to Checkpoint Charlie, which was there at the time before the wall came down.
Right.
And so once we got on the other side, we just went ballistic buying because it was, relatively inexpensive compared to what it would be in the States.
So let me ask you a question. What do you think was the issue that they had with you buying? Was it because you're a woman? Because you're
No. It
military,
was because
or
it was because we were spending a lot of money buying a lot of merchandise,
Right.
and nobody over there had the kind of money and could do that. So
Okay.
it was like an insult to
So
them.
it's just an economic
Yes.
issue.
Absolutely. So then we went back to where I was stationed in Pirmasens. I did my 3 years there, and then I left and went to. Wait, hold it. Let me see.
Okay.
There we go. From Germany, we went to. I think we went back to Fort Gordon.
Okay, and
And
Georgia?
worked. Excuse me.
Where's it at? Georgia.
Georgia, Augusta, Georgia.
Okay.
So we did our 18 months there. And then in 1990, we went back to Germany. Now we were in Karlsruhe.
Okay, so you're saying we, so your husband,
Oh,
you
yes,
and your
my
husband
husband and my children.
got to stay together?
Yes, oh
Okay.
yeah. Yes, actually, yes, because we were both in communications.
Oh.
So every time we PCS, a permanent change of station,
Right.
we were able to stay together. We didn't get separated like a lot of
Right.
couples do.
Yeah.
And so we went back to Germany, and that's where I had I had an incident with my commander at the time. I was working battalion staff, and I was working with my platoon as well, and we went on a field exercise to Belgium.
Right.
And I was assaulted by my commander at that time. And so, needless to say, physically, sexually assaulted by my commander.
Right.
So I went back. When I went back, of course, it was a whole lot of red tape and, because I was being threatened and so forth. So nevertheless, I somehow made it through. I never saw him again, which has an impact on me still.
Right.
Because whenever I go to the VA hospital, where I go to my medical treatment, my eyes are like this, wondering, is he there?
Right.
So I always wondered, am I going to see him again? And if I do see him again, what it's going to be like.
Right.
So from 1993, I would say it was when this happened, up until today. Whenever I go to the VA hospital, I'm still
Traumatized.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I've just got to ask, is your primary care or your doctors aware of your trauma?
Oh yes,
Okay.
I've been in counseling for years.
Okay.
For years.
At least you're getting that service.
It took me a long time to go, but then I finally went.
Right.
And I've only been here for about a year, so I didn't get back into that counseling. I'm going to try to just deal with it myself, but they're still aware.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So where are we now in our travels and our?
Okay.
Where are we stationed now?
We're still in Germany, and we are.
I thought you went back to Georgia.
I went back to Georgia, right? Well, after Georgia, I went back to Germany.
Okay.
Okay.
Same place?
Karlsruhe. So I stayed there. My husband retired in 90 while there. I retired in 95. I did what we call a European out because I had gotten all my degrees and I had raised my children over there. My children had never gone to public school. They were always in either Department of Defense schools, and when I was in Georgia, I sent them to a Baptist school, which was traumatizing to them, really, because they were the only blacks in the school.
Wow.
Okay, and
How
so
large was the school population?
it was pretty large, but I thought that since it was a Christian school, that it would be, the best place for them.
Right.
So needless to say, I let them go there for a year, then I took them out of there. And then they were in, when they weren't in the Department of Defense schools, they were in the private schools. So then I decided that I was going to do a European out. I decided that when I left home, African Americans didn't have any positive jobs. They didn't have any elite jobs, if you will.
What year was this?
1975 is when I left. And when I left, most people were laborers, or my mother was a social worker, but no one had the high echelon jobs.
Okay.
And so I wasn't going to go for that. I had gotten my degree. I got my bachelor's degree in psychology. Then I got my master's degree. I went to University of Maryland, European division. I started in Maryland, but
Right.
then when I transferred, they had a college in Europe. So I went and I got my master's degree. After I got my master's degree, I said, okay, well, it's time for me to get out. I will go home, get my license and certification. So I left my family in Germany.
Right.
That's what the European out is. I out-processed at Fort Meade in Maryland. I went to complete my last year at University of Maryland in College Park, where I got my licenses and certifications. And so now I was a licensed psychiatric and vocational rehabilitation counselor.
Okay.
And so my idea was that I was going to go back to Germany and I was going to provide these services to the spouses of the military soldiers.
Okay.
Okay. However, when I got to Maryland, I saw how progressive, how things had changed so much
Right.
from 75 to 95.
Right.
And it was like, it was breathtaking. We were in charge of everything. We had the high positions everywhere that I went.
Who was we?
African Americans
Okay.
had progressed beyond imagination.
Right.
So I says, well, I'm not going to go back to another man's country. I'm going to stay right here, and I'm going to work my own country with my own people and excel. So I called my husband. I said, baby, this is a land of opportunity for black folks. Y'all need to come back home, okay? And so, you know, he was working as a civilian at that time because he was retired. And so I said, well, you know, I'll look for the house and everything. So anyway, I bought us a beautiful home.
Right.
And then my family came back over in '96.
Right.
That's when I finished. And so then
That was the year that you got out of the service?
I got out in '95, but that's when I finished my degree.
Oh, you, okay.
My degree.
Right.
And my licensure
So
in '96.
You separated from the service and graduated, you're saying?
I separated in '95.
Uh-huh.
I had already gotten my master's, but to get my licenses, I had to go back to University of Maryland campus.
Okay.
Okay, and I was going to go back to Germany to work after I got my licenses.
Right.
But then I decided I didn't want to go back. So I found a home. My husband agreed. I found the home. We purchased the home. Then they came back to the States.
How many kids did you have by now?
2.
Okay.
2.
All right. Okay, so did you continue your affiliation with the military in any form, reserve or?
Oh no.
Okay, so you were done.
I was done.
Okay, so that was in '96 when you were done with school and the military by that time, correct?
Right. Well, I was. So before I finished, while I was still there, my family was over there. I started my internship. I was working again in a pre-trial release center. It was a grassroots program for criminals, for the prisoners. And I went to the prison and I did psychological assessments to see if they were ready to be released to society, if they could, you know, go back to work and be productive citizens.
So the re-entry program?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so after the ones that were released, they went to the pre-trial release center, which was a grassroots program. So I was a counselor there. So there, I would do alcohol and drug counseling because that's all they knew. That's what they had done. That was their lifestyle. When they hustled, they were hustling to get money to do that. So I did group and individual counseling for the prisoners. And then when I finished that,
How long did you do that?
I did that for about 2 years.
And then what was next? Go ahead.
After that, that's when I I was in the ministry also. So that's when I pursued my doctorate in pastoral care and counseling.
Okay. And was that it?
Was that it?
I mean, as far as your working career, are you still working?
Well, okay, like I tell people,
This is what you did after the service, right?
Yes, but then
Okay.
then in '98, I got introduced to a financial services company.
Okay.
So now, meanwhile, remember, I was doing drug and alcohol counseling. I was doing domestic violence counseling. I was doing all types of counseling. Then I was doing the prison counseling. So when I got introduced to the financial services business, I realized, I said, oh my God, the presenting issue for whoever I'm counseling is always finances. Whether it was domestic violence, whether it was drug and alcohol, whether it was those that attempted suicide, it was always had something to do with money. So that was another tool in my counseling toolbox, if you will.
Okay.
So now I was in the ministry, so now I was able to minister to the whole man, if you will. And so, of course, now my pastor put me in charge of the counseling ministry. And so I worked that and got licensed as an evangelist, and I did that until I moved here.
Okay. During your, well, I'm sure the answer is going to be no because your family was with you, but while you were in the service at any time, did you have any difficulty staying in touch with your family?
Oh no, we were always together.
All right. What about medals, citations, awards?
Yes. I have 4 ARCOMs, Army Commendation Medals.
Okay.
I have 4 Good Conduct Medals. I have National Defense Service Ribbon. That's what you get during the Vietnam era. Because when I went in during the Vietnam era. In the Women's Army Corps. Thank you very much. 1975.
Congratulations.
Nice.
Nice.
And so I have those awards and my honorable discharge and my retirement.
Congratulations. Okay, so you finish when did you finish your doctorate? Before or after you separated?
Oh, I finished my doctorate in 2012.
Okay. Okay. Did you share every place that you got to travel or visit? I don't care whether you were on R&R or going TDY. All the places that you got to travel during the period of time you were in the service.
Okay, no, we had field exercises. We went to California, Barstow, California, to do our field exercises. You know, again, I was in communications, so we were in. I even had while I was in Germany, I had what we call a gamma. Excuse me, a gamma goat. Excuse me, a gamma goat is an amphibious vehicle, which means it drives on the land and in the water. So I think that was pretty awesome.
Nice.
So we went to California. I told you about Belgium, Berchtesgaden. Berchtesgaden is where they have the salt mines. And so we would ride in this, what do you call those things? Like a roller coaster thing. What do you call them, kids? That you get in when you're on a roller coaster. Anyway, it was one of those.
Okay.
And we would ride through the salt mines.
All right.
Okay.
I know what you're talking. I think we know what you're talking about. Don't
A roller coaster car.
Yeah. Okay.
For lack of a better word.
Right.
And so we took my children there. I went to, like I said, Switzerland, Italy. We went to Italy. We went to Rome. We went to, so my children saw the Leaning Tower of Pisa. We went to the Eiffel Tower. I don't think there's anywhere in Europe that we didn't go. Well, we didn't go. We went to the East Bloc. I did not go to Czechoslovakia.
Okay.
But just about.
Did you get to Spain?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, yes. How could I forget that? I went to Rota, Spain, and to the Azores. And when I hopped, that was another reason that I stayed in the military.
Right.
Because I knew after I retired, I would be able to hop all over the world.
That's right.
And I wouldn't have to pay anything, except for maybe, at that time it was $2.50 for a box lunch.
Gotcha.
And so since I loved traveling, I stuck it out. Because I didn't want to have any regrets. You know, I knew that if I had gotten out when I really wanted to, I would have said, oh my God, if I just stayed in 7 more years, I'd be retired and I'd have this benefit. So, you know, that is what, you know, kept me in. Right. You know, is
the benefits.
The benefits.
Absolutely.
And so,
I've got a burning question for you.
Yes.
How long have you been a Buffalo Soldier, by the way?
I became a Buffalo Soldier in 1998. That was 3 years after I retired.
Why did you join the Buffalo Soldiers?
Well, my husband joined first.
Got it.
And so I knew that there needed to be something that we had in common. You know, I wanted to participate in something that he enjoyed in instead of us going our separate ways.
Right.
And not only that, but you might as well say I was born on the back of a motorcycle. My dad had a motorcycle when I was a kid.
Right.
And so ever since I was small, I was riding on the back of my dad's motorcycle. And then, as a matter of fact, when we got to Fort Jackson, I bought my husband his first motorcycle. And my younger brother, he had a motorcycle. So it was just second nature to me to, actually, one thing I didn't say, I thought I could drive a motorcycle. I had been on the back for so long. And I was 7 months pregnant with my son in South Carolina. I'm going back a little bit. And you know how they say women crave pickles when they're pregnant? Well, I did not crave pickles. I craved riding a motorcycle. And I was so convinced that I could ride this motorcycle because I've been on the back all these years, that I told my husband, I want to ride. I want to go, let's go for a ride, and I want to, you know. And so I bought him the motorcycle, so he didn't know that I didn't know how to ride. And so I got on the motorcycle 7 months pregnant. I cranked it up. I didn't know how to crank it up. I didn't know how to go.
Okay.
Then when we got to the end of the street where the stop sign was, it's like, oh snap, I don't know how to stop. So then I just grabbed this and I grabbed that, and we slid. Right on the other side there was some woods. So we slid into the woods. I laid down the bike on my leg. Thank God my son was fine. My husband found out that I didn't know how to ride a motorcycle. And that's how we found out.
Surprise,
So,
okay.
absolutely. So when I joined the Buffalo Soldiers, I took pride in that because my father was also a Buffalo soldier in World War II in the 10th Cav. And so not only was it to be able to spend time with my husband, but again, I was representing my father, which I took pride. I loved my parents and my family. So whenever I could represent them, that's what I did.
Okay, so what are some of the activities that Buffalo Soldiers have participated in?
Oh, we do charities. We do during Thanksgiving, we get turkeys and give turkeys out to families, 100, 200 turkeys, and not only that, but the fixings, you know, the vegetables and the vegetables and the canned goods, everything they need to make a full dinner.
The whole spread.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Then we do drives for various schools. We do book bag drives and coat drives for the children. Well, they don't need, I don't think they really wear coats here as much as over there, but we did coat drives where we had coats for every child that needed one. And then the Christmas gifts, you know, we buy them Christmas gifts, and you know, we distribute the Christmas gifts to them. So we're a charitable organization, the Buffalo Soldiers are.
Just a few. Go ahead.
And now we are about to adopt a highway out this way because my chapter is from Fort Pierce, West Palm Beach area, although I live in Port St. Lucie. So most of our charitable work is done in this area.
Okay. Okay. Just a few more questions. Did you? How did the military? What opinion have you formed about war? Because you weren't in the Middle East, were you?
No, I was in during that time.
You were, okay.
I was in during that time.
Okay, so from what you saw, or
well, because I feel like I was at war with the United States the whole 20 years I was in. That's how I feel.
Okay.
So, you know.
Why is that?
Why is that? Because I was fighting for my life against the military the whole time. Okay. Not only against, you know, like I had jobs, and if I didn't do what they wanted me to do, which went against my morals and my values. Right. You know, I was constantly being singled out and chastised for that.
So you feel like you were being discriminated against?
Absolutely, no doubt.
And that's because why? Because of...
That's because I was an upright citizen and I wouldn't do what they didn't want me to do. In basic training, it was because I was African American. Okay. And then female. I didn't tell you when I'm all over the place, but this is significant. When my first assignment as a drill sergeant, okay, I got my first assignment after drill sergeant school, and I went to the unit that I was being assigned to, and the the top drill sergeant says, "Oh, so you want to be a drill sergeant, huh? I'll tell you what, you're going to have to run faster, jump higher than any of these guys to be a part of us." So I did. So I did. And so I really rubbed a lot of them the wrong way because I could hang with them. Okay. I could do what they want to do. I stood by my morals and my values. Right. I would not compromise it, and it made a lot of them very, very unhappy with me.
Okay. Combat. How do you feel about engagement, military engagement, effects of war on
Right.
people physically and mentally?
Absolutely. I saw that in my brother. My brother was in Vietnam, and he suffered from Agent Orange and drug addiction. Actually, he had to have his jugular vein cut out when he retired. But to answer your question, most of the battles that we get in are none of our business. We have nothing to do with them. And those people that were our allies are now joining, I don't even want to say another country, and are no longer our allies. So I feel like the United States didn't fight for their own people, which was us during the time. So I wouldn't put my life on the line for them.
Do you feel like there's anything that you've left out?
I don't
Would you
think
like
there
to
was
share
a
with
stone unturned. I know I was all over the place thinking of things as they popped up.
Right. That's okay.
I don't know.
Beyond your education, and I guess you also use the GI Bill for your home?
Absolutely.
And use it for your education too?
Absolutely.
I take it? Yeah, right? Okay, so does any of my students, and by the way, I hadn't, I've got Cameron, Mary Beth, Marco, I forgot your name. Okay, Todd, and Mr. Williams, and I also have two guests from Representative Omari Hardy's office, Tricia Hallison-Mishler, and Kamea Unger. All right, just wanted to point that out. Does anybody have any additional questions that they're curious about, that they would like to ask this lady before we break?
Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, because I'm gonna lean in on this Buffalo Soldier thing.
Okay.
So, how often do you ride with your group?
A couple times a month.
Okay.
A couple times a month. And you were asking me before, who are the Buffalo Soldiers?
Yeah, I know.
Well, I'm glad you asked. The Buffalo Soldiers were commissioned in 1866. First of all, the Buffalo Soldiers got their name during, excuse me, first of all, the Buffalo Soldiers were the first African-American, the ones in the Army, were the first African-American fighters, ones that were allowed to fight.
Okay.
Okay? And so they did very well. They got a reputation, and that's why the motorcycle club was developed in 1993 to represent them. But the Buffalo Soldiers got their name from the Indians during the war, and we got our name because of our woolly hair, because of us wearing skins from the cattle, and from our ferocious fighting. Was how we got the name the Buffalo Soldiers. The Buffalo Soldiers were commissioned in 1866, the ones during the war, 1866, and they were decommissioned in 1944. So the motorcycle club represents them, and so we do, like I said, all charitable. We're a charitable organization.
Okay. One very last question. How did your service and experiences affect your life?
I think my service and my experience, I know they made me a stronger person. I believe I was strong when I went in. That's the only way I survived. But it made me stronger. It made me an advocate for others, not just females, but definitely females, and for others. They paid for my education, so I got something out of it, And it wasn't, I don't want to paint the picture that was all bad, because that's where I met the best friends in the world. There was a camaraderie in the military that does not exist outside, I must say.
No, it does not.
So that's the best thing, were the friendships and the camaraderie in the military.
It really felt like a totally, really connected extended family.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely, and like regardless of where you go.
Right.
Excuse me, if you're in somewhere and you see somebody that says U.S. Army retired or something like that, you feel safe and you're at home and you can ask them something, or you can depend on, getting good information
It's absolutely true.
and being safe.
Okay, well, I want to thank you for a fabulous interview, and I also want to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I hope I did you well.